Okay, let's get into this. I want you to really picture the scene because the date it's really important here.
It's everything.
It's January 2026, so we're just a couple of years down the road from now, and we're in Iran. The streets are, well, they're loud, the people are angry, the economy is in absolute free fall.
It's the classic recipe for unrest. We've seen it time and time again.
Exactly. But then, right in the second week of January, something happens that just isn't supposed to happen. Something that we were all told was, basically impossible.
The silence.
The silence. And to be really clear for everyone listening, we are not just talking about the regime, flipping the kill switch on the local internet service providers.
Right, or cutting the fiber optic cables at the landing stations.
That's old news. That's authoritarianism 101. They've been doing that for decades. I'm talking about the sky itself going dark.
It was a watershed moment. I mean, truly. It was the moment the idea of the splinternet, this fragmented global internet, it stopped being a theoretical concept you'd hear about in, think tanks.
Right, something for academic papers.
And it became a kinetic reality on the ground. A hard physical fact.
For years, we've been told by Silicon Valley, by NATO, by every tech optimist with a social media account that low Earth orbit satellites, and specifically Starlink, were the magic bullet.
They were the ultimate workaround.
The uncensorable internet. The logic was so simple, so elegant. If the government cuts the fiber cables in the ground, you just point a dish at the sky.
And the signal just bypasses the state's entire censorship apparatus.
Boom, you're back online. Freedom of speech restored, just like that.
It was a very powerful narrative, I think a very comforting one. It suggested that technology, at its core, inherently favored democracy, that it bent toward freedom by default.
And then, in early 2026, somewhere between 10,000 and 40,000 smuggled Starlink terminals in Iran, they just stopped working.
Almost at the same time, almost simultaneously.
Right, and this wasn't some kind of glitch. This wasn't a billing error because someone forgot to update a credit card on file. It was a coordinated military-grade attack on connectivity itself. And today, we are going deep, and I mean really, really deep into how they did it, because the source material we're looking at, specifically a dossier that's been circulating called Barackface.
And the technical analysis that goes with it?
Yes, that analysis outlines a terrifying new reality.
It really does. It shows that it's not just Iran versus its own people anymore. What we saw in January 2026 was the public debut of what intelligence analysts are now calling an authoritarian techno-alliance.
That sounds like something out of a bad spy movie, like a villain group.
Yeah.
But the implications are, they're deadly serious.
Oh, it's very real.
Yeah.
We're talking about Iran providing the testing ground, the laboratory, if you will.
The stage.
While Russia provided the heavy hardware.
The muscle. And China provided the intellectual blueprint, the brain.
So our mission for this deep dive is to break this massive event down. We're going to look at it in 4 distinct, really heavy layers.
First, we're going to get into the physics. I mean, how do you actually kill a Starlink connection? Because I honestly thought, like many people, that it was nearly impossible given how the tech is designed.
We need to talk about why that assumption was wrong.
Second, we're going to talk about Russia's answer to Starlink. It's a project called Zorky, which I confess I hadn't even heard of until I started digging into these notes.
And it's a total game changer for how we think about sovereign internet. It's a fundamental philosophical shift.
Third, and this is maybe the most hopeful part, we're going to look at the survival guide. If the satellites are dead, how is the resistance communicating right now? Because they are still communicating.
They've adapted. It's incredible.
And finally, the big picture geopolitics. What happens next? We're looking at actual regime change strategies, the role of the diaspora, and lessons being drawn from what happened in Venezuela and Israel in 2025.
So from the physics of radio waves all the way to grand strategy.
Exactly. So buckle up, because the sky is no longer a sanctuary.
That's the key takeaway, isn't it? The sanctuary is gone. Physics has finally caught up to the dream.
Okay, so let's start with what the source calls the impossible event, the technical takedown.
Yeah.
Can you set the context for us? It's late 2025. Protests are raging across Iran. What does that landscape actually look like?
Well, the situation on the ground was incredibly volatile. You had a complete economic collapse. I mean, hyperinflation that makes other historical examples look mild. The rial, the national currency, had lost almost all of its value.
So people's life savings were wiped out.
Wiped out overnight. And that was combined with a new wave of intense political and social repression. The usual triggers were all there, but amplified. So the regime did what they always do in these situations.
Pickle blood.
They initiated a total terrestrial internet blackout. Landlines, cellular data, ADSL, fiber optics, all of it was either cut completely or so heavily filtered through the national intranet that it was useless for anything other than, checking government-approved news sites.
Which historically is the exact moment when the Starlink terminals come out of hiding.
Correct. Over the previous 3 years, activists and ordinary citizens had been smuggling these terminals into the country. The estimates in the dossier vary, but they land somewhere between 10,000 and 40,000 active units.
That's a significant number. That's not just a handful of journalists.
Oh no, that's a real network, a decentralized lifeline. And for a few weeks at the end of 2025, it worked beautifully. It was the only way out. Protesters were coordinating logistics, live streaming crackdowns and abuses, talking to foreign journalists in real time. It was working exactly as designed.
And then January hits. And the first reports aren't, my internet is off. They're reports of packet loss.
Right. And we need to be very specific about this because it's a crucial detail. It wasn't that the terminals just powered down or, exploded.
There wasn't an on-off switch.
It was a degradation. It was packet loss.
Now, packet loss, that sounds like lag when I'm playing a video game online. But we're talking about something way more severe here, right?
Much, much more severe. We aren't talking about a little bit of lag where your video buffers for a second. We are talking about sustained nationwide 80% packet loss.
80%.
80%. So imagine you're trying to send a sentence to someone and 4 out of every 5 words just disappear into the ether before they reach the destination.
So it's gibberish.
Complete gibberish.
Cool.
Or you're trying to load a web page and maybe the header, the blue bar at the top, loads. But the content, the articles, the images, they never arrive. The request just times out.
So the connection technically exists, but it's useless.
The initial handshake, that first digital signal between the dish on the roof and the satellite whizzing overhead, it might briefly happen, but the data pipe is so clogged with noise and interference that it is rendered functionally completely useless.
And this came as a total shock to everyone. I mean, the common wisdom, the marketing pitch from SpaceX was that Starlink is like a moving target on top of a moving target.
It's a very difficult system to disrupt by design.
The satellites are whizzing by in low Earth orbit at, 17,000 miles per hour?
Something like that, yes.
They're encrypted end-to-end. They utilize rapid frequency hopping, meaning the signal is constantly changing frequencies to evade jamming. So how do you jam something that's moving that fast and changing its signal that often?
Well, as the source material so bluntly puts it, no system is immune to physics.
Right.
We got a little arrogant, I think, with our software-centric thinking. We thought encryption keys and clever software patches could solve any problem. But Iran, with a lot of help from its allies, didn't try to outsmart the software. They used brute force physics to overwhelm the hardware.
Okay, so let's get into the how. Let's break it down. The source lists 3 specific methods they used in concert to drown out these terminals. The first one is high-power Ku-band jamming. Explain that to me like I'm 5.
Okay. Imagine you and I are trying to have a conversation across a very large, crowded, noisy room.
Okay, I'm with you.
Our conversation is the Starlink terminal on the ground talking to the satellite in space. Now, imagine someone walks into that room with a massive industrial-sized air horn, stands right next to you, and just holds the button down indefinitely.
I can't hear you anymore. All I hear is the horn.
Exactly. You haven't been hacked. I haven't rewired your brain or figured out some secret code language we're speaking. I've just drowned you out with pure, overwhelming noise.
So the jammer is the air horn.
The jammer is the air horn. Starlink operates on a specific slice of the radio spectrum called the Ku band. That's roughly 12 to 18 gigahertz. What Iran did was deploy a network of ground-based jammers that simply flooded that exact frequency range with overwhelming high-power radio noise.
So it's not elegant, it's just electronic screaming.
It is the electronic equivalent of screaming.
Yeah.
It creates what engineers call a very poor signal-to-noise ratio. The delicate antenna in the Starlink dish, the dishy, it simply cannot distinguish the faint, complex signal coming from a satellite hundreds of miles away from the screaming static being blasted at it from a few miles away on the ground.
The whisper from space gets lost in the roar from the ground.
Perfectly put. But that leads to the second method, which I have to say I find even more insidious and, frankly, more brilliant in a dark way.
GPS spoofing.
GPS spoofing.
This is the one that really blew my mind when I was reading the prep materials, because I did not realize a satellite dish needed GPS. I thought GPS was for, Google Maps, for knowing where you are driving. Why on earth does a stationary dish on a roof need to know its location?
It absolutely does, and this is crucial to understanding how all these low Earth orbit constellations work. Remember, unlike the old geostationary TV satellites that just sort of parked in one spot in the sky,
Right, they just hang out over the equator.
Starlink satellites are moving thousands of miles an hour. They're constantly flying overhead, rising and setting like the sun and moon, but much, much faster.
Okay, so they're a moving target.
A very fast-moving target. Now, for your terminal on the ground, that little dish to talk to that moving satellite, it doesn't physically move. It uses something called a phased array antenna.
It steers the beam electronically.
Exactly. It effectively shoots a very narrow, focused beam of radio waves at that moving target in space. But to do that math, to calculate the precise angle of that beam at any given millisecond, the dish needs two absolutely critical pieces of information.
What are those?
It needs to know exactly where it is on the surface of the Earth, down to a few meters, and it needs to know exactly what time it is, down to the nanosecond.
So coordinates and a clock.
Perfect coordinates and a perfect clock. That combination allows it to calculate where in the sky the satellite should be at that exact moment. So what did the regime do, with help from their friends? They started broadcasting fake GPS signals across the country.
They lied to the dish.
They gaslit the hardware, it's the perfect term for it. They lied to the dish about its location and, crucially, about time. The timing is the most important part. If the terminal's internal clock is off by even a tiny fraction of a second, the satellite it is trying to talk to is already hundreds of miles away from where the dish is pointing its beam.
So the dish is pointing at empty space, thinking it's talking to a satellite.
Correct. It's looking for a satellite that, according to its bad data, its fake time signal should be right there. But it isn't. The connection fails to lock. And the real beauty of this attack, from the regime's perspective, is that it completely bypasses all of Starlink's fancy encryption.
You don't need to crack the code?
You don't need to crack the code, you just need to break the compass and the clock.
That is incredibly clever in a truly terrifying way. It's an attack on the fundamental physics of the system, not the software.
It is, and that ties into the third method, which is really a summary of the first two. A focus on raw, hardware-centric attacks. Think back to the war in Ukraine. In the early days, we saw Russia trying to hack Starlink using electronic warfare, and SpaceX would just release a software patch.
Right, it was code versus code, and Elon Musk's engineers were just faster.
They were. But you can't patch a radio wave that is being physically overwhelmed by a stronger signal on the ground. You can't write a line of code that fixes a broken sense of time. This was an attack on the hardware's perception of reality.
And this brings us to the hardware itself. The jammers, the spoofers. This wasn't Iranian tech, was it? The dossier is very, very clear on the origin of these machines.
Not the heavy hitters, no. The source is extremely specific here. This was advanced Russian electronic warfare hardware.
And how did it get there?
Weeks before the January blackout, satellite imagery and other intelligence sources picked up a number of Russian military transport aircraft Il-76s, the big cargo planes flying into Iranian air bases.
And what were they delivering?
They were delivering systems with names like Kalinka.
Kalinka. Sounds like a folk song.
It does, doesn't it? But it's a brand new system designed specifically to detect and disrupt LEO constellations like Starlink and its military cousin, Starshield. It's a very modern, very targeted piece of kit.
And that wasn't all.
No. Then you have the big guns, the Tobol system, the Krasuka 4, and the Murmansk BN.
The names even sound heavy and brutal. Describe these things for us. Are we talking about something a soldier carries in a backpack?
Oh, far from it. Picture a massive, heavy-duty, 8-wheeled military truck. And on the back of that truck is either a giant retractable radar dish or a huge telescoping antenna array. These are mobile, but they are substantial, power-hungry beasts.
And they must require a ton of juice to run. You can't just plug that into a wall socket.
They require massive amounts of power. We're talking dedicated generators, constant refueling. The source estimates that running a nationwide network of these things costs millions of dollars per day.
Millions a day to shut down the internet.
But you have to think about it from the regime's perspective. If you are fighting for your literal survival, the electric bill is irrelevant. Silencing the opposition, blinding the revolution, is worth any price.
So Russia provided the muscle, the trucks, the jammers, the hardware. But the source makes a very pointed claim that China provided the brain. What does that mean in this context?
This is the part of the geopolitical angle that really worries NATO planners. About 2 months before the blackout in Iran, a group of Chinese military researchers published a paper. It was an open source academic paper.
So not secret.
Not secret at all. And it was incredibly detailed. It outlined a theoretical method for how to completely disable Starlink over a region the size of Taiwan.
Specific.
Very specific. The paper detailed exactly how to use a network of coordinated ground-based jammers to create what they called a suppression net. It was a step-by-step blueprint. The source argues very persuasively that Iran basically served as the live fire exercise for this Chinese paper.
So Iran becomes the testing ground for a potential war over Taiwan.
Exactly. Beijing gets to test their theory on how to blind the U.S. military's favorite new communications network without actually provoking the U.S. military directly. They let Iran and Russia take the heat while they sat back and gathered all the valuable data.
That is chilling. So Iran is the lab rat in this new alliance.
In a way, yes. And it proved that this authoritarian electronic warfare axis is real. They are sharing notes. They are sharing hardware. They are integrating their capabilities against Western technology.
Okay, so Starlink goes down. The screen goes black for the protesters.
Yeah.
But the story doesn't end there. Because while Starlink was dying over Iran, Russia was looking at this whole situation and deciding they needed their own version.
They drew two very clear conclusions.
Which were?
One, LEO satellite internet is an incredibly powerful tool for projecting influence, a tool the West was mastering. And two, as a consequence of that, they absolutely cannot rely on a system owned by an American company run by Elon Musk. They need their own sovereign space infrastructure.
Enter Zorky.
Enter Zorky. It's the flagship project of Russia's massive multi-billion-dollar Sphere program. The goal is ambitious, to launch over 300 satellites by 2027.
Okay, but 300, that seems really small compared to Starlink's thousands. I mean, Starlink has, what, close to 6,000 satellites in orbit now?
It is smaller in number, absolutely. But the philosophy behind it is completely different. And this is the key point to understand. Starlink was built as a commercial product first.
Internet for rural homes, for RVs, for cruise ships.
Exactly. It was a civilian project that got adapted for military use later. Zorky is the opposite. It is military and strategic from inception.
So it's built for war from day one.
It's built for what the designers call a jamming-heavy environment. The source notes that Zorky satellites and the ground terminals are being designed with hardened encryption, advanced frequency hopping, and hardware that anticipates the exact kind of electronic warfare we just saw in Iran. They are building a network that assumes someone is actively trying to scream over it.
And they were building the terminals domestically, right? The plan is to start production in 2026.
Right, and launching them on their own Soyuz and Angara rockets. The purpose isn't to let soldiers in Siberia watch Netflix. The purpose is secure military communications, long-range drone control, and ISR intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance.
It feels like we are watching the dream of a single global worldwide web die, even in space. You know, for a while, space felt like this neutral commons.
That's the big picture insight here. That era is over. We are moving toward a fragmented orbital commons. Connectivity is now a domain of sovereignty. The new doctrine from Moscow and Beijing and Tehran is that if you don't control the satellites flying over your territory, you don't truly control your country.
It's the digital Iron Curtain, but in orbit.
That's a very good way to put it.
So we have the technical takedown, we have the Russian strategic response. But I want to go back to the ground, to the streets of Tehran, Shiraz, Isfahan. The internet is gone for the people, Starlink is jammed. But the regime is still online.
This is what the source calls the paradox of connection.
Yeah, can you explain that? Because usually when the power goes out, it goes out for everyone. It's the great equalizer.
Not here.
Yeah.
The jamming was, as the source describes it, scalpel-like. Remember, we said they were flooding the Q-band. That's a very specific slice of the spectrum. The regime's own internal communications, their military radios, their secure government intranet, their banking systems, they don't run on consumer-grade Starlink frequencies. They rely on their own sovereign fiber optic networks, dedicated landlines, and different military radio frequencies that are completely outside that Q-band.
So the protesters are in the dark, but the police commanders have full bars on their phones.
Precisely. It's asymmetrical blindness. The state can see everything. The people can see nothing. A huge tactical advantage for the forces of repression.
So what do you do? If you're a 22-year-old student activist in Tehran, and you can't get on Telegram, you can't get on WhatsApp, Starlink is dead.
Yeah.
How do you organize? How do you fight back?
You pivot. You pivot to the human element, the oldest network of all. When high-tech fails, low-tech endures. And the source outlines a fascinating survival guide that is being used on the ground right now.
Okay, let's talk about mesh networks. I've heard of these, things like Briar and FireChat. How do they actually work in a situation like this?
It's a brilliant and simple concept. Imagine a digital bucket brigade. You have a message you want to send on your phone. You don't have internet, you don't have a cell signal, but you have Bluetooth and Wi-Fi capability built into your phone.
Okay.
You use an app like Briar to pass that encrypted message directly to the phone of the person standing next to you using a direct Bluetooth or Wi-Fi connection. Then they walk down the street 100 feet, and their phone automatically passes it to someone else.
So the message literally hops from phone to phone to phone.
Exactly. It creates a decentralized, peer-to-peer daisy chain. There is no central server to shut down. There's no cell tower to jam. It's communication at a human scale. To stop a mesh network, the regime would have to physically confiscate every single smartphone in the country.
Which, with a population of nearly 90 million people, is.
Yeah.
It's logistically impossible.
It's completely impossible. Now, it's slow. You have to be clear about that. You're not streaming 4K video over a mesh network.
No live streams.
No. But for sending short encrypted text messages, for sending coordinates for a protest meeting point, for sending warnings about where the security forces are, it works.
And then there's the even older tech. I mean, way older. The source talks about walkie-talkies and CB radios making a comeback.
The classics, they're making a huge comeback. Short range, often encrypted radios, technology that predates the internet entirely. They're being used as a sort of neighborhood watch for the revolution.
How so?
If you're a lookout on a rooftop and you see a riot van turning down Main Street, you get on your radio and you broadcast a warning to the protesters who are a few blocks away. By the time the van gets there, the street is empty. It's a constant game of cat and mouse, but now the mice have radios.
I love this next term from the source, sneakernet.
It's the best. Feet become fiber.
It's the return to the USB drive.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds almost quaint.
It really is, but it's incredibly effective. We are seeing a massive resurgence in the physical smuggling of data. Protesters are taking videos of crackdown evidence, say a video of a shooting or a beating. They're loading them onto tiny micro SD cards or USB sticks, and they are physically moving them.
Like actual smugglers moving contraband.
Exactly. The same networks of smugglers who used to move things like alcohol or satellite dishes across the border are now being paid to move data. They'll move a USB stick packed with gigabytes of evidence from Iran into Turkey or Iraq, where it can then be uploaded to the world.
Or even within the country, right? From city to city.
Right, using courier networks. There's a quote in the source that I just wrote down because it was so powerful. A state can sever cables, but it cannot stop people from walking. It's profound, and it highlights something absolutely crucial. Technology is a tool, but the network is, and always has been, the people.
And speaking of tools, the smartphone itself has taken on a different role. If it can't upload, if it can't connect to the global internet, what is it good for?
It becomes a witness. It becomes a time capsule. Even when it's completely offline, the camera still works. The microphone still works. And so people are recording everything.
Everything.
Every beating, every illegal raid, every face of every plainclothes police officer. They are creating a massive decentralized archive of the regime's crimes.
And they just store it.
They store it. They hide the micro SD cards. They encrypt the files. And the security forces know this is happening. This is the crucial psychological impact.
Ah, so it's a deterrent.
It's a deterrent. A police officer might be beating someone in an alley today, but he knows that a video of his face exists somewhere. It might not be on YouTube or Instagram tonight because of the blackout, but he knows it will get out eventually. He is being recorded for a future trial.
There's another quote. The regime can jam satellites. It cannot jam memory. That gave me chills when I read it.
It completely changes the calculus of repression. It introduces fear and accountability into the mind of the enforcer. You can't operate with total impunity if you know the evidence is being gathered, even if it can't be broadcast at that exact moment.
Okay, so that's the inside game. The incredible resilience and adaptation with mesh networks, USB drives, all of it. But there's a whole other component to this revolution, the people on the outside, the diaspora.
5 million Iranians living abroad. It's a huge
Yeah,
number.
massive number.
Mm.
And these aren't just refugees struggling to get by. In many cases, these are highly educated, successful people with unrestricted access to capital, to global media, to Western governments.
They are the nervous system outside the country, while the heart, the protesters, under attack inside. That's the analogy the source material uses.
But historically, this diaspora has been, well, complicated.
Fragmented is the polite word for it.
Right. To put it mildly, you have the monarchists who want to restore the old system. You have Republicans. You have the MEK, which is a controversial group in its own right. You have secularists, leftists.
And they have spent decades, literally decades, arguing with each other. The source material is very critical of this. It calls it a circular firing squad. It says that the new mandate, the only path forward, is unity.
When one side is muted, the other must shout. That's the idea.
Exactly. And the source discusses the rise of potential unity figures, specifically mentioning Reza Pahlavi.
The son of the former Shah. Now, that's a controversial name for a lot of people inside and outside Iran, isn't it?
It is, absolutely. But the source makes a very interesting and nuanced distinction. He's not being positioned in this new strategy as a king returning to his throne to rule by decree.
It's not about restoration.
It's not. He's being positioned as a bridge figure, a symbol of transition, someone to hold the banner of national unity while the country stabilizes, not necessarily someone who will rule indefinitely, a transitional, symbolic head of state.
A stabilizer. Someone who can talk to the West and maybe even factions of the old military.
Right. Someone the army might respect enough not to initiate a full-blown civil war over, and someone Western leaders already know and can talk to. But the bigger point is about the diaspora's tactical job. The source says it has shifted from just, holding protest signs in Paris to being the customer service for the revolution.
Customer service for a revolution. What does that even mean?
Think about it tactically. The internet is down inside Iran. Who pays for and runs the VPN servers and Tor relays that people will need when the net flickers back on?
The diaspora. People inside can't make international payments.
Exactly. Who meticulously collects all that smuggled USB drive footage, verifies it, translates it, and logs it as evidence for the UN or Amnesty International?
A diaspora.
Who runs the social media campaigns, keeping the hashtags like #WomenLifeFreedom trending so the world doesn't forget? Who feeds the algorithm when the people inside can't?
The diaspora. They have to act as the proxies.
They are the IT department, the press office, and the legal team all combined into one. It's a huge shift in responsibility.
The source also mentions a geopolitical pivot for the opposition. And this part really surprised me. It suggests the opposition needs to stop only talking to its friends in the West. It needs to talk to the bad guys.
Russia and China, yes. It's a deeply controversial idea.
Why? I mean, why would you talk to the very countries that are providing the hardware and the blueprint to help the regime jam your satellites and crush your people? It seems counterintuitive.
It's pure, cold-blooded realpolitik. Look, let's break it down. Why do Beijing and Moscow support the Ayatollah's regime? Is it because they love Shiite theology?
Of course not.
Is it because they have a deep ideological commitment to the Islamic Revolution?
No, it's because they hate the U.S. and see the regime as a useful thorn in America's side.
That's part of it. But the much bigger reason, the one that actually guides their policy, is stability. They're terrified of chaos on their borders. They want reliable energy exports from the Persian Gulf. They want their Belt and Road trade corridors to be secure. What they fear most is Iran turning into a black hole of chaos like Libya or Syria.
So the opposition needs to go to them and pitch them a better deal on stability.
Exactly. The pitch isn't about democracy or human rights. The pitch is a business proposition. It is. A democratic, post-clerical Iran is open for business. You want to buy our oil? We will sell it to you, probably with more reliable contracts than the current regime. You want to use our territory as a trade route? We will keep it open and secure.
So it's about reassuring them. We aren't going to kick you out. We're just going to run the country better and more predictably than the mullahs.
It's reframing regime change. It's not a chaotic, Western-backed color revolution. It's a managed transition to a more stable, predictable partner.
You have to neutralize the fear that keeps Russia and China backing the current regime.
That is the entire game. The opposition has to prove they have a day-after plan. They have to look and act like a government in waiting, not like an angry mob.
And the source says emphasizing Iran's long history helps with that.
Precisely. Reminding the world that Iran isn't just a 40-year-old revolutionary experiment, it's a 2,500-year-old civilization. Talk about Cyrus the Great and the history of statecraft, project an aura of competence and stability. That's what the world, and especially China and Russia, wants to see.
Okay, let's move to the endgame. The source draws some really interesting lessons from hypothetical events in the year 2025. Two major precedents are cited: Israel's 12-day war with Iran and the removal of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela.
These are the case studies that are informing the new strategy.
Let's start with Israel. What happened in this 12-day war scenario, and what does it teach the opposition?
The source describes it as a short, sharp campaign of humiliation. In this scenario, Israel doesn't invade Iran. They don't occupy territory. They use a combination of cyber attacks and precision airstrikes to systematically paralyze the IRGC's command and control structures.
So this is not about destroying the country.
Not at all. It's about puncturing the mythology of the regime's invincibility. It's about showing the Iranian people, and more importantly, the rank-and-file military, that the emperor has no clothes.
And no effective air defense.
And no air defense. It demonstrates that the regime can be surgically wounded, even blinded, without destroying the country's essential infrastructure. That's a crucial psychological distinction. You don't need to level Tehran to change the government.
And Venezuela.
Yeah.
In this scenario, Maduro is gone in 2025.
Yes. And the lesson there is that even deeply entrenched authoritarian regimes can fall surprisingly quickly once specific targeted pressure is applied. The aura of invincibility is a psychological barrier. Once it breaks and key figures in the military and security services see that the ship is sinking, things can move very, very fast.
So the military doctrine for changing Iran shouldn't be a full-scale invasion like Iraq in 2003.
Absolutely not. The source is adamant about this. It argues for what it calls surgical decapitation.
That sounds...
It is. It means using targeted strikes, whether kinetic or cyber, to remove the leadership of the IRGC, to disable the nuclear infrastructure, and to dismantle the tools of repression. But, and this is the key part, leaving the regular army, the Artesh, and the civil service infrastructure largely intact.
Why is that distinction so important?
Because you need those institutions for the day after. You create a power vacuum at the very top for the people to fill, rather than smashing the entire state into pieces and creating a power vacuum everywhere, which is what leads to chaos and civil war.
And then comes the hardest question of all. The one that no one wants to talk about, the off-ramp.
The moral dilemma.
Do you let the bad guys get away? Do you let the supreme leader and his inner circle just leave?
If you want to avoid a civil war that could kill 500,000 people, the pragmatic answer from the sources, sometimes, yes, it's a bitter pill to swallow.
It's a negotiation.
It's a negotiation. It's trading power for peace.
Like Ben Ali in Tunisia, who fled to Saudi Arabia, or Ferdinand Marcos in the Philippines, who went to Hawaii. You take the stolen money and you go into exile.
It sticks in your throat, doesn't it? Justice absolutely demands they stand trial and rot in a cell for their crimes. But pragmatism might demand they live out their days in a dacha outside Moscow if it means the shooting stops tomorrow and the country can begin to heal. It's an awful, but maybe necessary, compromise.
And that would lead to the transition mechanism, an interim government of technocrats, a constituent assembly, to write a new democratic constitution.
And again, this is where the source sees the role for someone like Reza Pahlavi, not as a ruler, but as that ceremonial stabilizer, the person who cuts ribbons and calls for national unity on television while the experts and lawyers actually rebuild the state.
It's a fascinating and incredibly detailed roadmap. It moves us all the way from the technical despair of that Starlink blackout to a very concrete, if difficult, plan for the future.
It shows that technology is a critical new battleground, but politics, diplomacy, and strategy are still how the war is ultimately won or lost.
So we've covered the tech, the high-power Ku-band jamming, the Russian satellites, the sneakernet USB sticks, and the high-level grand strategy diplomacy. What's the synthesis here? How do we wrap all this up?
I think we have to reflect on the true nature of modern conflict and modern resistance. It's hybrid. It's not just one thing.
It's not just cyber. It's not just troops.
It's high-tech jamming trucks flown in from Russia, and it's a 20-year-old kid running down an alley with a USB stick in their pocket. It's multi-billion-dollar satellite constellations, and it's a carefully worded diplomatic letter delivered to the Chinese embassy. It's all of it at once.
Everything everywhere all at once.
It really is. And the most chilling part for me, the part I keep coming back to, is that first point we discussed, the sky going dark.
Yeah.
The source mentions that the sky is no longer a sanctuary. And I think we lived in a very brief, maybe 10-year window where we believed that the internet was floating above us, a neutral space, untouchable by the dictators and censors on the ground. That window has now slammed shut.
And if Iran, with significant Russian and Chinese help, can successfully silence 10 to 40,000 Starlink terminals across an entire country.
What happens when your connectivity becomes the target? What happens if a conflict breaks out in Eastern Europe or the South China Sea? Are we now entering an age where the internet effectively fractures into national or regional intranets protected by their own satellite constellations and electronic warfare systems? Is the global web a relic of the past?
That is a genuinely terrifying thought. The splinternet, fully realized from the ground all the way up to low Earth orbit.
It's not just a thought experiment anymore. It's what Zorky's being built for. It's what the Great Firewall of China is for. It's what those truck-mounted jammers in the Iranian desert are for. This is the new reality.
Well, on that cheerful note, seriously though, this entire deep dive has been a real eye-opener. It's a stark reminder that connection is fragile, and freedom, whether it's digital or physical, is something that has to be fought for, adapted for every single day.
Absolutely. It's never a given.
To you, the listener, the learner out there, stay curious, stay connected while you still can. Thanks for diving in with us on this one.
See you next time.
Catch you on the next deep dive.